Dear reader, most people recognize Noah as the man who built the ark, but have you ever wondered what he was really like? How did he have the necessary skills to accomplish such an overwhelming task? Who were Noah's parents? When and how did he meet his wife? Was she a godly woman? More than a fourth of all human history passed by the time the flood devastated the earth, yet this period is compressed into just 6 chapters of Genesis. So we're left to wonder about how many things might have been. While it is certainly believable that a righteous man would be scoffed at by a wicked society, the Bible just does not tell us this about Noah. So even though it makes sense, we must realize that idea is merely speculation instead of scripture. As strange as it may seem, one of our main goals in writing this novel was to help readers distinguish between fiction and biblical fact. Yes, you read that correctly. We want to use fiction to teach how to discern between fiction and biblical, historical account. To help in this goal, we will include a non-fiction section at the end of the book that includes answers to multiple questions that may arise as you read, as well as some surprises for readers who have visited or plan to visit the Ark Encounter theme park in Kentucky. So join us as we respectfully imagine what life for the man who built the Ark might have been like. Sincerely, Tim Chaffey and K. Adams.
All right, guys. Welcome once again to another episode of the SBU English Club podcast. I am Andrew.
And I'm Jay.
We have something very, very interesting. We are reading Noah, Man of Destiny by Tim Chaffey and K. Adams. Now, this came in from Jay. Jay, do you want to give us an indication of where this book even came from? Because I had no idea that this book existed before you brought it up.
Yeah, I heard about this book probably a year or so ago, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, on another podcast called Oh No, Ross and Carrie. And they went to the Ark Encounter in Kentucky, which is a big replica of Noah's Ark that purports to be historically accurate. So, of course, the Bible's description of Noah's Ark is rather vague, but they claim that they've reverse engineered the way everything would have worked, from the architecture to the way the animals would have been cared for to the way that the living quarters would have been set up, and they built it. It's not an actual floating structure. It's like a building designed to look the way it would have looked, but I think it's to scale. And as a tie-in to that theme park, which is what they call it, they wrote a trilogy of books that fleshes out the characters of Noah, his wife, and their children. And this is the first book in that trilogy, which focuses mainly on Noah and his wife getting to know each other.
I have been dimly aware of the Ark Encounter for a little bit. I never really thought much about it, but it's really funny that what amounts to a fantasy trilogy has come out of this for the purpose of marketing.
Yeah.
So I liked this for a lot of reasons that the authors probably didn't want me to, and I disliked it for a lot of the reasons that the authors were probably hoping that I would like it for. So it was a really interesting reading experience for me.
Yeah, I suspect that if you aren't a Reagan voter or the child of a Reagan voter, you'll have a similar experience to that, where you like it for reasons that they would not have appreciated, and you dislike the parts that they wanted you to like.
Yeah, so it's interesting in a lot of different ways because, like you probably could tell, this is one of our first novels with 2 authors. The other one would be True Allegiance, where the co-author was the American CIA. So Tim Chaffey is the guy who made the theme park and put it all together, or was very, very involved in it, at least.
Yeah, I think he's the royal vizier of the Ark Encounter.
Okay. Whereas K. Adams is just some lady who is associated with this, who's probably the writer behind this book.
Yeah, if I had to guess, I would suspect that Tim Chaffey served a more advisory role and made sure that all of the tie-in elements were lore accurate to the theme park, and then K. Adams probably did a lot of the actual writing of the stuff. That's purely speculation, but
this definitely was something that I was a little bit nervous about tackling, but I think we actually can unpack a lot here. This is something I really missed out on in my time in SBU. This is a true story. As I was wont to do, I was sitting at lunch alone reading in the student union when a youth pastor came up to me, and he started, they like to come around and recruit people, and he was asking me about whether I believed in God, and I was like, Well, that's a really interesting question. I really find the concept of Aristotle's unmoved mover to be really compelling. But, there's a lot that I don't understand about eschatology, for example, that I find a little bit of a barrier for my understanding. And upon me saying this, he got up without another word and never talked to me again. I was very sad about this. This is a true story. So this is like the experience that I've always wanted to have at SBU. We can tackle this text that deals with some pretty high religious concepts in a way that is both respectful but also realistic from a fiction telling perspective.
Yeah, they're very interested in it being respectful, given that this was written by like right-wing Christian fundamentalists, and I don't attach right-wing on there just to like draw a line between myself and them. This is a known thing. The Ark Encounter is very tied in with like Hobby Lobby, which is of course tied into a bunch of like lobbying. So being respectful to the Bible, at least their understanding of the Bible, is really, really key to the project of this piece.
Yes.
And it results in some things that I think are good for the book, and then several things that are also not good for the book.
So we'll get right into it. Just hold on for 1 second. I wanted to tell you guys about some new developments in the SBU verse. Get on our Discord. We are having so much fun. Our moderator has made a quiz for you to decide whether or not you are Team Oro or Team Grimm. We have writing discussions. We have behind-the-scenes looks. It's just become a really great community, and we would love for you guys to be a part of it. So there will be a link to that in the description or the top comment. We hope to see you there. I've already recognized a lot of familiar faces, so it's been fun, and I hope to see it grow over the next year.
Yeah, and this is a place where Andrew and I are actually hanging out. So if you're interested in talking to us and picking our brains about things or pitching ideas for future episodes, please hit us up.
Yeah, and we have like a Minecraft server. I don't know what to do with a Minecraft server in the year of our Lord 2024, but if you want to play Minecraft, we got you hooked up. Let me know if you have any ideas on that front. If you like what we do and you want to see more of it, we have donation links on our official English Club Podcast website at
englishclubpodcast.com/link in bio gradients. Well, there's some dashes in there, but go to the support us button on the top bar, and then there's like a PayPal link and a coffee link.
We're just kind of excited to make a community out of what we've been doing here. So hope you guys are a part of it, but we will stop bandying around and get right into Noah, Man of Destiny, Book 1 of the Remnant Trilogy by Tim Chaffey and K. Marie Adams.
Do we know what it's a remnant of? I have literally no sense of what remains, which is no longer.
He is the only thing that remains of the old world after the flood.
Oh.
So
okay. That's kind of grim.
So Jay, I know that you have really dived.
Hello.
You've really dived into this book and produced a thorough summary, the likes of which we've seen in our Nova's playlist episode. I'd love it if you could kind of walk me through this, because I just kind of consumed it like a shonen anime where things just happened at me, and it's very hard for me to put it together. So I'm very glad that you did the legwork here.
Yeah, I aspired to your level of thoroughness. I was so moved by your 19 arc summary of Nova's playlist, which was in its own way quite shonen anime-like.
As the foremost Nova's playlist scholar, it is my duty.
This isn't quite that comprehensive, but it is substantial.
Lay it on me.
So, I would like to couch expectations a little bit before I start summarizing.
Okay.
3 things that are really important to know pre-summary. So this is like paratextual or metatextual information.
Gotcha.
The first is that if you're in this to hear about Noah, the boat guy, do the boat thing, you can leave. You can leave right now, because Noah will not even conceive of the boat in this book.
Which is so disappointing.
It literally is.
Because he conceives of other boats.
He conceives of, like, the concept of a boat. And if you are wondering then, what is the central conflict of this story? You can leave again, because you won't be getting one of those either, so forget it. Noah built the ark when he was over 500 years old, according to the Bible math in the back of the book. And this book covers only Noah's 30s to 50s. So we're like not even quite a tenth of the way there.
Right.
Also, this is the final important thing. This novel purports not to be true, but to be conceivably true, right? Like, this is historical fiction.
Yeah.
It self-identifies as fiction, but it's also explicitly designed to fit into the worldview that the Ark encounter has, like, constructed.
Right.
And so, like, the idea is that everything that happens is conceivably completely plausible within the schema of their research.
Right, which you could call, like, Bible literalism, young Earth creationism. I don't know the exact term, but something like that.
They are definitely young Earth creationists.
Right.
I don't know what flavor, but their Earth is younger than ours. They have a cooler, hipper Earth. Our Earth is all crusty.
That was surprising that this is like Noah's early life. So just kind of imagine that we're describing, I guess, like a coming of age fantasy novel.
Yeah.
More so than Bible historical fiction.
Yeah, theoretically, this has the potential to be like the first like Earthsea book, coincidentally, which also features like a big ocean.
Hey, maybe there's some overlap there.
Maybe so. But I just want people to not arrive at the end and be like, where's the
boat?
Because that was my reaction.
Yeah, no, it's mine too.
And if people like this, maybe we'll do the other two at some point.
Yeah.
So this book begins in the ancient world. Not exactly sure when, but the book was written by young Earth creationists, as we said, so it can't have been more than a couple thousand years ago, in a small farming village somewhere, we can assume, in the ancient Middle East / Mediterranean.
Yep.
The village is part of a larger kingdom, or maybe empire, that's quote-unquote godly. This is the word that they use over and over again. But we don't really find out anything about this society, or like the way its government is structured, anything about its culture necessarily, or even where it is located. We get no sense of like an actual present day like geographic feature that could locate us, ground us in the actual place that this is supposed to be happening at.
It's just like a remote, isolated farming village. The two rivers, Wheel of Time. You know, it's just a village where farming happens.
Yeah, it is like the Ur village. It is the platonic ideal of village, town, people live in it. It's like the default skin of a village. This is the Unity store free download. I don't know anything about what the buildings look like even. I don't know anything about the climate, about the plants. It's just a place.
Right.
So Noah and his family, they're farmers. They live on the outskirts of town, so they're like remote from the remote. He and his brother are like very like physically active. They like to race and wrestle and shit. And this is a thing that comes up a lot, like dudes being guys and like having a bro time.
Chad shit.
Yeah. So one night, their house is broken into by a thief, and Noah and his brother, they like apprehend him. They chase him out into a field, and they tackle him, and they knock him out. When he comes to the next morning, they learn that his name is Ater, and he's on the run from like some group of raiders that he believes killed his family and burned down his home village. He's been on the run for months, and he's been looking for a place to stay, so he's been surviving by like, I guess, serially breaking into people's houses and stealing their food and then running away, which seems like a really bizarre strategy if he's been on the run for months. I don't know why he didn't just like run into a village that he felt like was sufficiently far away and then ask for help. But this is what he did.
He ends up there. It's fated.
It's destiny.
Yeah.
Noah, man of destiny. Noah's father makes the decision to employ Ater, based on the reasoning that God has commanded his people to be charitable, and they are godly people. They're good people, which means they do good things, and the good thing to do is to forgive this guy.
Sure.
It's
very Disney.
It's very Disney. It's conceivable. Like, I don't feel like it's an unbelievable decision, but it feels like it's more meant to demonstrate, like, that these are good guys more than it is to be, like, sensible.
Right.
This kind of opens up, like, sort of a plot hole for me, not to be like, ding, CinemaSins. But it is weird that all of the, like, quote-unquote godly characters will go on to behave, like, uncannily, like, modern, middle-class evangelicals, despite ostensibly there being no text containing God's wisdom to follow at this point. Like, there's no Bible, there's no Old Testament, there's nothing. There's just hearsay from previous generations that communicated directly with God. In the world of the novel, God does not communicate directly with the world anymore, so it's really unclear, like, how his teachings are being retained in the same form that they originally arrived at, right?
It's supposed to be like oral tradition, right? Because they kind of remember the previous generations. They don't really, but they have he said that he said on and up the chain.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is, like, everywhere they go where they meet quote-unquote godly people, they believe the exact same thing about God, despite God being many generations removed. So never mind the fact that, like, one particular oral tradition might have mixed up a detail here or there. We have all of these different lineages of oral tradition that are all exactly the same, and they're all completely accurate to what God said, like, thousands of years ago, maybe.
Sure.
Which is very weird to me, because that's just not how speech works. Ater does turn out to be, like, a good guy and a good farmer, and he and Noah become friends.
Yep.
Noah learns that Ater is a member of, like, a different religion, because Ater has this, like, big tree tattoo on his back that Noah sees one day while they're out working in a field. And this religion sounds kind of interesting. It's sort of like a parallel for, like, a godless spiritual practice. At least that was my interpretation of it. It has, like, a little bit of, like, a quote-unquote mysticism type vibe, and that there's, like, a mindfulness practice and, like, martial arts are involved. Noah will repeatedly solemnly shake his head at this throughout the book, because it teaches you to discover your, quote, own inner wisdom rather than always default to what a higher power has told you to do, that being God.
Right.
They are very against this idea that, like, looking inward is in any way fruitful unless it confirms what God has already told you. So there's, like, some conflict, some, like, cultural conflict there, but it's not, like, immediately violent, and it seems like both characters stand to learn something from it and maybe grow. I was optimistic about that.
Yeah, Ater is very susceptible, like, right off the bat to Noah's way of thinking.
Yeah, that was another thing about him, is that, like, he seems like kind of a cultural member of his religion, and that, like, he was raised in it, but, like, he doesn't personally have much emotional attachment to it. So when Noah starts telling him about, like, not Christianity, Ater is immediately like, oh, that sounds really cool. I'm kind of into that.
Right, with no resistance whatsoever.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to hold on to his faith much at all, which is maybe because he's meant to be, like, a model for a quote-unquote, like, good atheist or, like, good non-Christian.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Guess one of the convertible ones.
Yeah. Around this time, we learn that Noah wants to be a carpenter, but his dad, who is again a farmer, is really against this idea, because it would likely mean that Noah has to move away, probably to somewhere where carpentry as a full-time job is in demand, which is not at home on the farm. So over the course of a few chapters, he and his dad have, like, a few spats, and then we get this scene where Noah has his adult initiation ceremony. I would have thought this would have been made a bigger deal of, but it's just kind of like, you're 30 now you're an adult.
People are living on the biblical timescales here.
Yeah.
People can live for hundreds of years, I think, like, up to 1,000, maybe less than that, but, like, 40 is the new 18 in this world.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of neat too, the way that, like, no one cares that that's how it is. No one questions it. No one has any reason to question it. I thought that was pretty effective world building.
Absolutely.
So after Noah becomes an adult man, his dad changes his mind and sends him on his way to go get a job as a carpenter, on the condition that he take Ater with him, I guess, to, like, protect him and also get rid of him. I
have no idea why.
All of a sudden, his dad was being kind of passive-aggressive and being like, yeah, okay, Ater, you can go with Noah, like, it'd be really cool.
Ater's supposed to be, like, a preternaturally good farmer.
Right.
All we know about Ater is he used to be in a cult, and he's really, really good at farming in a non-specific way that everyone comments on. And that's, like, his one thing.
Literally everyone is like, Ater is such a good farmer.
Right. I have no idea why they sent this guy away if they're losing a farmhand in the first place. But whatever. Maybe there was some behind-the-scenes drama.
So the reason that Noah finally gets permission from his dad, not just because he's turning fantasy 18, but also because his dad like has a connection in a nearby city who he thinks can get him a job. So there's this like kind of ancient LinkedIn situation happening, which to me feels very reminiscent of the way that like getting a job probably works as a evangelical Christian today, where it's like through this string of like church friends and like neighborhood friends. So I felt like that was fairly revealing of like potentially of the author's biography, but that doesn't super matter. It works fine in the novel.
Yeah.
This will go on to be a pattern though. Like every time someone in the book gets a job, it's because they know a guy who knows a guy. It's never because like they apply normally or whatever. And this is also like Nova's Playlist, a book that has like a weird fixation on everyone having a job. Everyone needs to have a job.
You have like a God assigned job. It's not just like a job. Like you are meant to do this thing.
Yeah, which is a comforting world to imagine, I guess.
Oh God, I'd love that.
Ater seems to like farming just fine.
Yeah.
He even finds a farming job later when they move to another city, which, sure. So anyway, at this point, Ater is no longer a character. From this point on, he will only talk about his dead family like twice, and he will never express any interest really in even like making a serious effort to go look for them, except for like one time, which then he immediately does not do.
Yep.
So he's done. He's gonna be there, but now he's been resignated to the position of like, I don't know, RPG party member who's no longer plot relevant, but who you lug around for the rest of the game because like they have a very specific niche skill that's useful against certain enemy types. Okay, so on their way to the first major city of the novel, they come to this town. I don't remember the name, it doesn't matter, but it has a reputation for being ungodly. They are immediately robbed, and then they're like, oh, that sucks, and then they leave.
I forgot about that city. Yeah, they don't even confront the robbers, they just go.
There's like a woman there who like tries to like tempt them with her, I don't know, her body or something, like, but in a way that like distracts them so that they don't notice they're being robbed. It's very transparent what's being done here, like on a narrative as well as an ideological level. Like on a narrative level, they're just trying to say the world outside the godly people zone is evil. Everyone's evil and they're out to get you and you should be afraid.
Right.
On an ideological level, it's to suggest that like people who don't follow our religion have no morals and you can't trust them. We get this cutaway scene then to the novel's other main character, Nama.
I love her.
Andrew, I know you're a big Nama stan now, and I understand why. Do you mind telling us some things about Nama in this opening scene, if you remember?
I barely remember. She talked to her brother about plot points that will become relevant in time.
Yep.
And it was kind of like a quarter one prologue, if I had to call it anything. It was like, don't worry, guys, plot's gonna happen. Here's this weird character who you've never heard of before doing shit. But for the life of me, I'm so sorry, dear listeners. I do not remember what she was talking about, only that she had goals.
We know that this scene is somewhere else, like far away, but we don't know where.
Yeah.
So like the spatial dislocation is intensified at this moment because it's like, wait, I didn't know where I was before. Now Noah's moving and I double don't know where he is. Now we're somewhere else and I triple don't know where anything is.
Worst time for this to happen.
Literally the worst time for this to happen. Okay, so what they're talking about is Nama and her brother are mad that their dad, who is a king in the land that they're in, has taken a second wife. It's making their mom upset, but she doesn't say anything because she wants to be a good wife.
Right.
Which means being submissive and silent, essentially. So she doesn't complain about the fact that the king has taken like a younger, sexier second wife who is about to have a child. I think she actually gives birth in this scene.
I remember the baby.
Yeah, so she gives birth, then the scene ends.
Yep, that's it.
So then we're back to Noah and Ater, and the second town they get to is a godly one, which is good, because being godly is good.
It's like a godly village.
Yes, it's a bigger village, I think, than the first one, but it's not really it's not the main one that they're going to. They have a party. The people don't really trust them at first, but then Noah is like, I remember the creator's ways, and they're like, now we sort of trust you. And then during a party, 2 kids from the village/town are abducted by this rogue band of kidnappers. So Noah and a group of townsfolk set off into the woods. They track down the kidnappers for several days, and then they stop them from kidnapping the kids. They rescue the kids, and Noah wins over the trust of the townsfolk.
The kidnappers, though, are part of the cult that Ater used to be in.
Yeah.
So he gets them off their guard by doing their secret snake handshake or whatever. Some shibboleth that, like, proves that he's one of their rank.
Yep.
So that was a pretty interesting way to include Ater in there, because these guys are, like, going to sacrifice these children.
Yeah.
So this is when we learned that, like, Sifa cultists and/or the culture they represent routinely practice child sacrifice.
And because they're afraid of the kidnappers coming back, they brand all of the kidnappers with the brand that the kidnappers put on the kids to mark them for human sacrifice.
Yep.
So basically, the kidnappers won't come back now because they're defeated, and they also can't go home because they've been branded, and that means that they'll be killed. So they're, I don't know, abandoned to the wilderness forever.
Sure.
And the novel makes like a big deal of like what a virtuous and righteous decision this is, because it's like punishment, but it also doesn't kill them. It just consigns them to live in the prehistoric wilderness where there are literal dinosaurs.
And eventually die. But at least
So
you're not the one doing
our
it.
heroes.
Right.
Right. Noah was not the one who held the knife.
Right.
So...
Habeas corpus.
Right. Oh, yeah. And then Ater pops back up to wonder vaguely if the kidnappers were the people that, like, raided his village and killed his family. Again, he's never going to do anything about it,
Right.
but he's like, that'd be kind of funky, wouldn't it? Anyway. So they leave this town, and they eventually arrive in the city that they were originally trying to get to.
Yep.
But the guy who was gonna hire Noah doesn't have a job for him. So Noah has to work somewhere else in town in the meantime until the guy just has a job open up.
The job that he wants is currently occupied by this guy who's made out to be like a jerk who's like trying to mac on the boss's daughter.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to be like, you know, a minor antagonist, but he disappears off screen in the next chapter. And the boss dad is like, oh yeah, my daughter never really liked him. I never really liked him. Imzara, my daughter, rejected him, and then he went away. So now you can have a job.
I really thought he was going to wash up as a body on the shore, and that was going to kick off some intrigue, or that like he was going to come back later as a cultist.
Yeah.
And be like, Noah, I hate you for stealing my woman. But no, he's just gone.
Gone forever. Maybe he's in book 2 or 3.
Maybe.
I hope he comes back in book 3 with no reference, because it's literally a chapter that he exists in, and he's never mentioned again.
Thank you for bringing up Imzara. Because the next bullet point I had was that this is exactly when Noah begins flirting with her, again, his boss's daughter. In both of their interior dialogues, they start talking about being in love with each other, and that's not me paraphrasing. They literally are saying, in love.
Yes.
Love is equated to, like, a crush, basically. And keep in mind, these are two adults who have never dated anyone before, neither of them, anyone, ever, and... They don't know anything about love, but they're saying this is love, and the novel will go on to confirm that this is the case. So sort of like with the jobs thing, where like, I guess you just get a starting class that God assigns you. You also are assigned a partner somewhere down the line, and you'll just know them when you see them. Ater wingmans for Noah. He gets his first date with Imzara. After like 2 dates in a few months, Noah offers her like a little promise ring on this cliffside where there's pterodactyls.
There's pterodactyls! And the promise ring! And the promise ring is the weirder part.
Yeah.
Because there's not rings. When did rings come into being as like a symbol of matrimony? Because I know it was not 2000 BC.
No, it certainly was not. And I don't think pterodactyls were still around in 2000 BC, but I digress. We have a beautiful confluence of two things that never should have met, and it results in a wonderful... This is a very Disney moment, speaking of Disney.
Oh, yeah.
One thing I wanted to make sure I said was that Noah makes it clear that he asked her dad first before he gave her the promise ring, and she's, like, turned on by the fact that, like, her dad approved the passage of her from his possession into Noah's.
That's literally how it's framed.
So they agree to marry in 5 years after Noah rises through her dad's shipbuilding company a little more. Then we cut back to Nama, who goes and sees an oracle, parentheses, bad and sinful.
Right.
He gives her a meaningless and useless prophecy. This has the same problem as other prophecies that we've seen in the English Club before, particularly in, I want to say, Lightlark, where the prophecy is extremely vague and it doesn't help the characters in any meaningful way. It exists only so that after a thing that resembles it comes to pass, the character can look back on it and be like, oh my god, the prophecy was right. And it's like, okay.
That's kind of how it works with like tarot and horoscopes, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is confirming the fact that those things don't work as future predicting mechanisms.
But yeah, no, it really is not much. But it was like, what did it say? Through the storm there will be light, or something like that, which was very Noah-pilled.
It was literally a random assemblage of nouns that sound interesting.
Yeah.
It could have been anything. And it turns out that it is sort of nothing, and it could have been cut and nothing would have changed. Okay, so the shipbuilding business is going well, but they don't have a strong enough material to hold the hulls of like big ships together for overseas voyages.
The most interesting plot point in the world. We don't have the right metal to build our boats with.
They're like, we want to start overseas trade with faraway kingdoms, but our boats are small, and so we can only sort of like go around the edges of the sea, because if we go out in the middle of the sea, then it gets too rough and then our boats sink. So we need a stronger metal to hold the hulls together.
Yep.
This whole concept is like so blatantly there just to like promo the Ark encounter and like prove that they did research.
Yes.
There's no other conceivable reason that we would care about this, but this is what kicks off like the main arc of the novel.
Right.
And at this point, we're like over halfway through it, so I don't know what's been going on. They have this inkling that there's people in a city across the ocean that have something like what they need, so Noah and a few others agree to like sail over there together and get it. When they arrive, they find themselves in the land of Havilah, which is where Nama has been this whole time. Mm-hmm. So now we're like, okay, he's in the Nama city. So he's in the evil city. They have the metal. That could be, I don't know, tense.
Right.
There could be intrigue. There could be plot.
Sure.
They meet a blacksmith who can make iron, which turns out to be the metal that they need. Mm-hmm. And he also happens to be the prince of the whole country. And after him taking them to meet the king and establishing trade relations, some of the king's sexy dancers do a sexy dance.
I forgot
and
about
Noah
the
is extremely turned on, but like scandalized, and like makes so much of a point about the fact that he looks away because he
Right.
doesn't want to like see these women's bodies.
Which would be a betrayal of Imzara.
Right. Yeah. In a bizarre, I don't know, progression of events, they bring the prince home with them so that he can help them build a forge and learn how to make iron back in their home country.
Because there's iron deposits in the pterodactyl cliff.
Yes, there's iron deposits in the pterodactyl cliff, so they open a mining company on the outskirts of town to get ore, and Nama also comes with them because she doesn't want to leave her brother.
Right.
And this is when there's a bit of a love triangle thing going on for like half a second, because Nama flirts with Noah continuously. And from this point on, whenever we get inside of her mind, we learn that she is thinking about ways that she can seduce Noah and steal him away from Imzara. This has become her only motivation.
Yep.
This escalates to the point where she is like getting very, very aggressive with her advances, and Noah has to like flat out tell her off and be like, bro, cut it out. And she's mad about it. She's big mad about it.
She cries about it.
Yep, she cries about it. She's very upset. So then Noah and Imzara get married, and he, at the wedding, talks about how excited he is to impregnate her.
Yes, yes.
We should go back and find that and read it. After a few months, Noah has to take the prince and princess of Havilah home for a big festival, and Imzara comes with them. So they're now all in Havilah. All of our main characters are there.
Yep.
Not long after arriving, Noah is arrested for some stupid reason that doesn't matter.
It doesn't not matter.
We'll get there, because the actual reason for the arrest is not the reason that he's given, so I don't want to give the given reason because it just adds more confusing details.
Okay.
So he's arrested for false reasons, but he doesn't know it's false at first. Anyway, the whole time he's arrested, all he can think about is like boringly and emotionlessly being like, I hope the creator saves me. I trust the creator to save me. Meanwhile, Imzara is like, the creator will save Noah. I trust in God to save Noah and protect us and our covenant of marriage. So then Nama shows up and makes a big deal of being like, why did you arrest Noah? I'm the princess. You can't do this. And the guards are like, oh, we're so sorry, Your Majesty. We'll let him go at once. And she's like, begone from my sight. So then she and Noah are alone in a room.
Yep.
And she reveals that she had Noah arrested on false charges so that she could confront him and force him to marry her. Because she's like, well, my dad allows for polygamy now. And you're in my kingdom, so I'll be your second wife. And then I'll be happy, and you'll be happy, and Imzara will be happy. And it'll be perfect. She basically tries to, like, SA Noah. He gets away, and while he's gone, or right after he leaves, the oracle from earlier appears and is like, Nama, let me be your evil court wizard. And in return, I'll give you evil god powers from the evil god. And she's like, yes, I'm evil now, and I'll make Noah my husband if it's the last thing I do.
That's exactly how it goes. Oh my god.
She stares right down the barrel of the camera, and her eyes turn red or something. Maybe green.
No, they get like snake-like. They have like a slit.
They get snake-like?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so then Noah and Imzara reunite at the big festival that's happening, only to realize that the big festival is being held so that the king can announce that he is converting his entire kingdom forcibly from... What was the other god's name?
Not Sifa.
Sifa?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to convert the whole kingdom from Sifa worship
to
literal Satan worship.
Right, okay.
He's like, we are all going to worship the Great Deceiver now because the Great Deceiver is actually a giver of knowledge, and the Creator, which is God, is trying to withhold knowledge from us, which, according to the Bible's account, by the way, is true. But we don't like that. That's bad.
It's interesting how they have different interpretation of the same story.
Yeah.
You know, they're like a cousin branch of these Noah farming villagers.
Yeah, so like they basically like have the same story. They apparently have access to it. They just interpret it differently, which is like a thing that happens when you have literature. So that raises questions about like if God is all powerful and is able to perfectly communicate information, why did he communicate it in a way that like would allow it to be misinterpreted so that people end up worshiping Satan? But anyway,
the folly of man, Jay.
Okay, sure. We'll leave it at that. So anyway, they become Satan worshippers, the whole country all at once.
With no resistance whatsoever. They literally just like start bowing.
Yep. They start bowing and scraping, and Noah and Imzara flee on a boat, and they're like, we must consult God about what to do next.
Yep. And that is the end of the story. So I'm really glad that came across as a series of events that really didn't amount to much and didn't seem to be terribly related, because that's also the impression that I got, except for the dinosaurs. I was really excited every time a dinosaur was involved.
Yeah, I wanted to include more dinosaurs in the summary, but they rarely show up in any like plot relevant way.
Right.
Maybe one thing I could have mentioned is that like the dinosaurs seem to be getting more aggressive. Mm-hmm. Like Ater theorizes that the dinosaurs are becoming more violent as we move away in time from the fall of man.
Right.
And creatures start eating more meat. So that's a thing that's happening in the background, which I assume will come to something in either the third or second book, but not in this one.
This is why there are no dinosaurs, because the Satan worshippers deputized all of the evil dinosaurs. So there's going to be a T-Rex fight, Jay. There's going to be like...
Oh, yeah, no, there is one.
There is one?
Yeah, there is one. Noah, I know at one point from the other podcast that I listened to that Noah is in an arena, like a coliseum, like gladiator style with a T-Rex at some point.
Oh, well, that's not as exciting as my thing. I was thinking like climax of Ready Player One, where there's like an army of dinosaurs fighting each other. To complete the ceremony, Noah slowly unwound the length of leather cord around his waist and cinched it between himself and Imzara at rib level. He wrapped it around them, causing her to stand closer. As he pulled the cord, the space between them quickly disappeared. Her eyes shone brightly, and she blushed. He never wanted to let her go. She raised her mouth close to his ear.
Most couples wrap it pretty loose.
He winked. Well, I guess we aren't most couples. Yeah. I don't know. This is probably like so if you're like in homeschool and this is like your only exposure to literature, that's a really cute little scene. It's very romantic.
It is. It also highlights something that I want to talk about later, which is that this novel like totally fails to imagine an interesting prehistoric culture.
Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there. So you've clearly really mapped out the plot structure and understood what's going on under the hood here. So surely you found something that you liked about it, Jay, right?
Yeah, actually, one of the first things that I liked came very early, which was that Noah's family kindly took in an asylum-seeking immigrant from a different racial, ethnic, and religious background than them. They immediately trusted him, despite the fact that they had very little in common and that he was from another country with that he had crossed many borders to get there seeking safety, and they trusted him and they showed him common kindness, humanity, and I thought that was nice.
That is really nice. It makes Noah kind of aspirational in that regard.
Yeah.
That is sweet. Like I said, it was a little bit Disney, but it just barely worked more than it didn't. I was okay with it. Ater works enough as a character, and he seems to be a well-to-do little guy. So, I mean, as far as openers go, and as far as tone settings go, it's like you're showing the family doing what they do best, and that's being wholesome and welcoming. And
Christian,
really good representation of morals there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good moral to teach your young Christian children about immigrants. Anyway, so this novel is tacitly vegan,
right?
And so is the ideology behind the Ark encounter.
Very vegan, very weirdly vegan.
Very vegan. The implication is that eating animal products of any kind, but especially meat, is sinful because it requires death, and sin is the entrance of death into the world,
right?
And plants don't count in this. So eating animals is bad. In line with that, Noah is set up as kind of an animal lover. It's not highlighted too much in this book, but there is a scene where he has to sacrifice a goat. And we get a little bit of description of like he has a hard time like slitting its throat, not just like physically, but also emotionally. And so the fact that he has some kind of empathy for animals, I felt like was good foreshadowing for what we know has to happen in the second or third book, which is that suddenly he is like the animal guy.
Yeah.
So that was pretty good.
Yeah, the implicit veganism, I don't know if it's like a good thing as much as very, very interesting. I loved the implications of that. And it's not overt or preachy in that regard. It is literally a bad guy will eat meat and a good guy will not. And it's never explicitly drawn attention to other than, the animal sacrifice scenes, which are a necessity for their religion. It worked very, very well to illustrate what I think they're going for, like the world falling into sin, and to do it in a way that's like vegan. Like I keep saying that, but like it literally is like don't harm animals. That's so interesting and true to the Bible in a way that people gloss over.
Yeah.
So it really shows a level of research and a different perspective. Because I mean, a lot of everyone, let alone evangelicals, are perfectly happy to eat meat and not even think about it.
Evangelicals are not known for being a particularly vegetarian, God forbid, vegan bunch.
Right.
And I think that like including this risks alienating the core demographic somewhat. But it commits to it.
Yeah.
It has drawn a line in the sand and said, being vegan is what God wants.
Kind of marrying the idea of this novel's philosophy to its characters, I did like Noah as a main character. Talk about working just barely more than not. I thought that he's kind of like this homeschooled, well-to-do, how are you, sir? Thank you, ma'am. Let me take your hat. Like that personality would have worked really well in comparison to these really hostile and alien settings. The Noah was working right. I don't think the setting was quite there, but that's not the character's fault.
Yeah.
So I was really interested to see in kind of the juxtaposition of his character and the hostility and sinfulness that he's going to encounter.
Yeah, he's definitely somebody who is set up as like challengeable, or he might face challenges because of where we know he's going and where he comes from. The fact that there's going to be conflict there is foreseeable,
right?
Just like because we all know what's coming, and so that creates an interesting potential dynamic.
Yeah.
That it doesn't come about in this book, but it might in the next ones.
Yeah, there's a lot of gladiator T-Rex fights to look forward to, apparently. So we'll see how that goes. And speaking of characters with potential, Nama, I was kind of doing like a bit earlier, but like she really has a lot of potential as a character. I mean, her goal is really just to marry Noah, but she wants, in some abstract sense, this power. She's trying to navigate this social structure as a woman. The role of women in this traditionalist society, even without the extra stuff with like the polygamy practiced by these Satan worshippers, is really interesting. And having her struggle against that and try to have some kind of agency made her the most interesting character in the book.
Yeah, I completely agree. Even though we know that she's going to have to die by the end of the third book.
Right.
The situation that she's in is, like you said, for like various social reasons, really interesting. Mm-hmm. And also because like she's starting the story from a place of hurt. Like her dad is kind of like replacing her brother, and her mom, so like their whole side of the family, with like a newer, shinier family. She has like more personal stakes, I think, in what happens than Noah does. At least at this point.
Fear of replacement versus I really want to be a carpenter are a lot of difference in terms of compelling motivations. So I really gravitated towards her.
Yeah, especially because Noah's goal is met
pretty solidly.
By the end of this novel, he did all the things he wanted to do, which was marry Zara and be a carpenter.
Yeah. So, I mean, despite what I was saying about him working well, he really was lacking in that department. But speaking of Imzara, there was one scene I liked with them, like a Noah Zara scene. I don't even remember which one it was. I just remember being like, oh, that's kind of cute. And I'm pretty sure it was the pterodactyl promise ring scene. I don't know if that's a broken clock or something was actually working there, but I don't know. It's like, that's cute.
Yeah, it's cute.
Yeah, that's really kind of all you can say about it. It's very chaste. It's very promise ring, homeschool, you gotta impress the father kind of thing. But sometimes it kind of works in its own framework. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's deeply unsettling from an outsider's point of view, but we can save that for later. Within the structure that it wants you to buy into, it's cute.
Right. The operative point is it's within the structure. So in a couple of our episodes now, I've talked about how much I have a pet peeve with the Tiffany problem, especially like Fourth Wing, where you had like characters named Oriel and her brother's name is Chase. This did not have that problem, and it's kind of very illustrative on the other side of the coin. I have no idea if any of these names make etymological sense. Like, I don't know enough about like Semitic languages to know that this makes sense. But it sounds right. It sounds more right than Oriel, Chase, and Rydok hanging out in one room together. So I never had a problem with the world building in that regard.
Yeah, I liked all the names. Ater is a little weird because it looks French to me, but I got used to it.
Ater does look French. But he's supposed to be from somewhere else, so I can forgive it versus Nama and Noah.
I also looked up some of the place names that are mentioned, like Havila or Havil. That is a real place that's mentioned in like the Bible or some other ancient text. Mm-hmm. I don't know like if it's being used the way that it's understood to have been real historically, but I like that shows more evidence of real research and thought being done to make this seem like cohesive.
Yep. And abstracting this away from even the supposition that this is researched and or plausible in real life, I am really, really curious as to the biography of our authors here, because to segue off of the naming conventions thing, the control of the fantasy genre here is really, really good. Like, not great. This isn't a transcendental work of fantasy literature, but it's like a really smart college student did it. not someone who has no experience with this whatsoever.
I didn't necessarily get that vibe, but that's not to say I disagree. I just wasn't picking up on the prior fantasy writing experience, so I was sort of curious, like, what clued you into that?
While thinking about this, I actually coined a term that I'm going to be teaching to students for years to come in St. Balasar University. It does something, and you really feel this early on, something that I like to call suxposition, which is a portmanteau of exposition through supposition.
Okay,
I consider this to be the strongest form of exposition when you're dealing with the secondary world. You can do an opening paragraph explaining the history and the circumstances. You can do it as if it was a textbook, or you could do it like with an omniscient narrator and specifically compare and contrast points. But no, here, people live for hundreds of years, and the dating pool is a lot smaller, so sometimes cousins marry cousins, or unions form in a way that we wouldn't consider very orthodox. But it just tells you to suck it. Noah's a 40-year-old person, so he is now officially a man. And in saying that, we learn, okay, this is the time scale that we're working on here. They never sit us down and be like, in the far-off land of Erie Ginsham, where people lived for hundreds of years. There's none of that cheesy, pulpy BS that prevents the narrative from moving forward. And that's something that you don't see in someone who has like a little bit more insecurity about their world building and or their research into the Bible, which they're trying to present as like plausible historically. And there was another thing, it kind of goes into the veganism angle. The world building is a very, very direct reflection of the character. Speculative fiction exists to take certain aspects of our world or the human experience in general, crank them up to 11 and see what happens. So this world is as adolescent as Noah is. There was that one scene when I think it's like right before they go to the village or right after, it doesn't even matter because it's not even a scene, where they come across like a carcass that's been eaten, and they think about like, oh my god, the T-Rex that did this must be like super mean. And like what you were saying, they reflect on why the T-Rex would have sharp fangs in the first place. And they're asking themselves implicitly, has the world always been this mean, or am I just starting to notice it? And that's very unsettling in a compelling way. And it's something that people ask themselves a lot as they get older, is like, have things always been like this? And that mirroring Noah's experience is exactly why fantasy exists, exactly why speculative fiction exists. This is not like a good book, but that aspect of the genre really shows a level of control that I was not expecting.
Yeah, and that moment really made me wish that we had a slightly more introspective character. And even if that wasn't going to be Noah himself, maybe that could have been the role that Ater served, to like ask slightly more probing questions about the nature of the world. Because you're right, that is super fascinating that this world is new. It's only a few generations old. Granted, the generations are longer, but it seems like people just kind of like age slower to be in line with that.
Right, they mature proportionally.
Yeah. So it seems like there's only been a few generations of people who could have learned about the world. And so like there would be lots of new stuff to discover, just like totally new. And that would be scary, but also exciting. And I think like a character who served the role of investigating that more would have been really interesting. What I also think is cool about the observation you made about their teeth changing is that not only does it set up this question about was the world always this mean, which works really well for like a YA-ish book, but it also tells us about the worldview that the authors are trying to get us to buy into, which is that there is evolution, but only to a point. So the Ark encounter has its own, I hope I'm using this word right, like taxonomy. So they don't believe in like species that evolve into other species in like the traditional sense.
Right.
They believe in these things called kinds. So like essentially there's like a goat kind, which is like the thing that is goat. Like it's like the platonic ideal, to use that unironically, of a goat. And things can evolve, but only insofar as they remain goat-like. right?
Right. They're just goats with sharper horns.
Yeah, but it will always still stay goat because God created all the animals, and the animals don't change from that design. So like it's conceivable to them that the dinosaurs, in order to consume flesh in this sinful world, suddenly get sharp teeth, but they'll still be dinosaurs at the end of the day. They will always be dinosaurs. So I think it's that detail serving like a cool dual role.
I really don't want to get too into the weeds here, but that's interesting because that's how biological niches work, right?
I guess so.
That's something that blew my mind. Most trees are unrelated to each other. They just convergently evolved to be trees.
Yeah.
So maybe animals aren't so much species as roles in a biblical sense. Like evolutionary niches in an environment.
Yeah, they're kind of like concepts that just exist. They're like fundamental to existence.
Now that's good apologism. That's better than there were T-Rexes here right next to Noah's hut.
Yeah. It's a comforting thing to believe because it's very stabilizing. It's like very grounding. It's like, well, there were always goats. Like maybe they looked a little bit different and maybe they called them something different, but they were always goats and there will always be goats because like God laid it out this way, and it will always be that way, and that's very nice.
Well, there have been ungulates for a minute. Right? And there have been grazing herbivores for a minute.
Yeah,
so...
but someday there will cease to be those things.
Says you.
Yeah, says me. And I've got the tarot cards here to prove it. I drew the 4 of dead ungulates. It says right here. They're on the way out. Read it and weep.
Your days are numbered, cloved hooves.
That's right. We're starting up goat sacrifices again.
Oh my god. I don't have anything else that I liked about this book.
Oh, I liked the part where Noah says he's gonna impregnate Emzara.
I didn't.
Here it is. Having her around has been so good. Emzara blinked faster. She cleared her throat and tried again. I didn't know all that I missed, but this week's given me a glimpse of what having a mother would have been like. Because she just met Noah's mom for the first time, and also she didn't have a mom herself.
Yep.
Noah kissed her hand. You have all the qualities to be a great mother. And after tomorrow... ... God,
I forgot about that part.
She blushed and then looked back up at him.
That really makes me want to walk back the thing about thinking they're cute sometimes, because that's just foul.
It's very foul.
I wouldn't say that to anyone.
Yeah, it feels like a threat, or it reads like a threat.
Yeah, it feels like... a threat of pregnancy.
It did make me laugh, though. So does that count as liking it?
Did you laugh with or at it? That's always my metric.
It wasn't a malicious laugh. It was more like a, you don't realize how weird this sounds, and like, I feel sort of bad for you.
Oh, like when your granddad makes like an off-color joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. I don't know if I can echo your sentiments.
Noah looked past the father-daughter duo to the covered object that took up much of the stage. A shiver slinked down his back when he discerned the shape under the cloth. He cupped Zane's shoulder. Right now. Noah led his group off the platform and headed for the north gate while keeping his ears tuned to the king's voice for any warning that their absence had been detected. The third change follows naturally from the second, Lamech said. Sifa taught us great discipline. We learned how to fight and control our feelings. But if we're to achieve a deep understanding of this world, we need to call upon the source of that knowledge. Noah's stomach turned. The great deceiver was about to strike again. Many of us grew up with the story about the first man and woman being deceived by a serpent. Our ancestors used this story to create rules to control us, to keep us from doing what we wanted, and to take away our freedoms. But our ancestors lied to us. If we're going to become the greatest people in the world, then we need to serve a god who can lead us to those heights. Noah turned and tapped Farna's shoulder when they reached the exit. Head straight for the ship and get it ready to leave. Well, Andrew, 2 by 2, we walked our compliments right up into the arc of our critiques, and now it's time to open the floodgates, as it were, and sort of wipe the sin away from this novel. I'm sure that you had plenty of sins that you noticed and kept in your the Book of the Dead. So hit me with one of them, if you wouldn't mind.
Tim, K. Marie, this book was almost completely unreadable. By virtue of the second term that I've coined just for this episode, TFLD. Any clue what that might stand for, Jay?
TFLD. Too fast, long dick.
Close. Very close. And you guys aren't the only ones guilty of this. There have been people that I've had in writing groups, and there have been books that do this. Twee-friendly little dialogue. All of the dialogue exchanges in this entire freaking book, other than the like little moral lessons and basic exposition, is, "Hi, how are you? Hello, sir. It is good to see you. Oh, I am so happy to see you, Noah. Remember when you saved my farm the other month?" And like they go back and forth, just trading platitudes and talking about what a good little boy you are. It does nothing. It doesn't add anything to the characters. They're not talking about things that we've experienced or that change our interpretation of the characters. They're just having small talk, and that's not unrealistic, which is kind of frustrating from a writing perspective, but this is kind of what people mean when they mean that dialogue should always be serving a purpose, because when it doesn't, it is so obvious.
Yeah.
And I literally had to close the book because people were just complimenting Noah, or Noah was being like, "Oh, I'm so happy I could be of help, sir."
Yeah, it's really just boring, frankly.
And it pads out the length.
And it doesn't serve a narrative function.
This is why there's no room for like interesting stuff to happen, because people are just talking and not even about like interesting stuff.
It feels very representational of the way that, in my experience, many like evangelical Christian like friend circles work, where a lot of people just have these like very friendly, plain conversations. Everything is extremely appropriate. It's offensively inoffensive. Not much is challenged. There's always closure. That was the thing that really bothered me about the dialogue, is there's like a couple times where there's like a disagreement about how to handle a situation, and whoever plays the, "well, God said to do this" card, they win the conversation. And the person who had previously disagreed is forced to just sort of be like, "Oh yeah, God said to do that. You're right. I need to think more about what God says to do." And then they leave the stage.
And that's one scene, right? Like, that happened early on in Ater and Noah's journey. I think Noah was just like grumpy. There wasn't like a particular reason, but they had like this little spat between the two of them, Ater and Noah. And I thought there would be like a little bit more drama, but it's like Jay said, God said, "Don't fight with your friends," and they don't fight with their friends anymore.
I marked it as like pointless fight. It's like a Sunday school lesson. There's a lot of those.
Yeah.
Those little Sunday school lesson moments.
It just makes it pedantic, and we don't need it. Or if we wanted it, we need to stretch it out to be a little bit more compelling and weighty. Because this is like a couple pages. They go from fighting to making up because God says don't fight.
God says don't fight. This, I think, connects nicely to one of my biggest overarching critiques of the whole book, which is that because it has this worldview where godly people are good and ungodly people are bad, it is in tension with the very concept of the way fiction often works. Noah can't ever be bad in any meaningful or sustained way, because if he was bad, he wouldn't be doing what God says.
Right.
And if he's not doing what God says, then he's not godly, and then he's not Noah anymore.
Right.
So the book, like, kind of backs itself into an ideological corner that way. Noah can't really do anything wrong, which means he can't learn anything.
Right.
Because if he was doing things wrong and learning things, then he's not fit to be Noah.
Which is the Empress Teresa problem, but we didn't notice that before because Noah doesn't do anything, unlike Empress Teresa.
Yeah, he doesn't have a Hal.
Yeah, ideological corner is a really good way to put it. Because so much of this book is limited because this has to be something that Brad, the youth pastor, can give to his Wednesday small group at First Baptist Church in St. Balasari, town.
St. Balasar. We need a town name for St. Balasar.
Right? If you could come up with a town name for St. Balasar, comment and like and subscribe. But anyways.
I feel like it should end in Boro.
Yes, it should.
Like B-O-R-O.
Yeah, it should.
Like maybe like Stones Boro.
We'll workshop it. So much has to be done to temper the world, temper Noah, where it would probably be more compelling to have these moments of temptation and have Noah overcome them. That would be probably more godly than to never make a mistake. I mentioned in the Nova's Playlist episode that the Gospel of Luke tells us that one repentant soul is more celebrated in heaven than 99 who were perfect. That's exactly what they're talking about here, is there's nowhere for Noah to go because they're afraid of having that. And I want to segue from that into the world building a little bit. That really has the exact same problem, where the structural problems are a result of the philosophy. So I don't know if I would say like there's no plot, but like we have this vague sense of threat in the beginning of this child sacrifice cult, and it becomes very real when there are children who are kidnapped. But this is in arc 1. This is in the first like 50 pages. And we go to what should be the pit of all of this. We should be at like the most sinful place in the world. And this is the list of their sins: eating meat, coveting wealth, worshipping idols,
belly dancing,
and dressing scantily sometimes for special occasions, and practicing polygamy. Now, even in a completely evangelical perspective, a sin is a sin, right? But child sacrifice, eats meat, and wears lingerie are not the path of like increasing sinfulness that we want here.
Agree to disagree. But one thing that I want to say before we move on from the polyamory polygamy thing, because you brought up again, and it's not a long point that I have, but there is something I think that's interesting that I want to say about it. Which is that the novel frames in that scenario the polyamory / polygamy as the sin, and not the actual harm that's being done, which is King Lamech ditching his old wife, essentially, and like really emotionally and probably also materially, like in terms of like financial support, injuring her. In a way that like makes him like kind of a huge shithead. Like, again, for the book, the sin is not that he's like being mean to his wife in a way that like clearly wounds her and her children, which are also his children. The sin is the legal act of marrying two women, which to me is such a bizarre value system, because it's not based on actual harm being done or like actual injury. It's based on like at some point God made a rule and the rule is broken. That's the problem.
Right. The concept of holy marriage, right?
Yeah.
Harming your wife by having another wife and child sacrifice put on the scales. Maybe to St. Peter, they would be about the same. But to me, as a fiction consumer, why did we start at child sacrifice and completely forget about it when we should be in the thick of it? It didn't make sense from a progression standpoint, and it didn't follow up on that promise that we were given in the beginning, where I was like, okay, wait, the world is getting worse here. That's where things are going. That's where we understand the direction of this is. We need to have the fictional elements here working in tandem with that.
I agree 1,000%. And what I was really hoping for was a progression of the child sacrifice, and that like, okay, we hear child sacrifice is happening. We see the kidnappings occurring. And then we have this scene at the end where the king is like, hey, guess what? You're all Satan worshippers now. Here's a big statue. I really thought during that scene he was going to be like, and also here's a cage full of all of the children that we've been kidnapping. Let's kill them on stage right now to prove that we're like Satan worshippers. But I guess he doesn't do that. So apparently they're being sacrificed at some other time, in some other place, not at the big ceremony for the evil thing that you do.
That would be so easy. That's a good suggestion right there, is just have that be there in description. Like, we don't even need to go anywhere with it. But like, not mentioned, not introduced. Child sacrifice is just not in the second half of the book, which is very bizarre to me. I can't get over that, because we're supposed to be following this world in moral freefall. That's the implicit promise, and I don't know. It never gets there.
The world in freefall is such a great way of phrasing it, because the thing that we know definitionally must occur before, at least before the third book is over, is that every single human other than Noah, his wife, their sons, and their wives becomes godless and is killed.
Right.
That has to happen. So why are we not actually seeing that occur?
Yeah, Noah's family, or at least Noah himself, should be exceptional. There are way too many nice people in this world. Mm-hmm. Not even the village. They shouldn't exist at this stage in the development. I don't know how many years it is in the book until the flood, but it feels really close.
It's about, I think, 400 at least. Because he's he's supposed to be 500 when he builds the Ark by Ark Encounter rules. So yeah, the world should be really starting to show signs, I would think, of things being bad. He should step off the farm and be like, uh-oh. We're really not in Kansas anymore. We're not in Erie Geshem anymore.
Right, and the way you do that is not have your horse be robbed off screen. It needs to be a little bit more scandalous. I'm not saying go full Game of Thrones, but have something that is unambiguously bad and represents the destruction of the earth.
Yeah. I can't think of a better way of putting it. I'm so curious to know how the novel goes about removing all of the other virtuous characters between now and the flood.
Right.
Is it going to have villains pick them off one at a time, or are they going to come up with some other explanation for how they're not virtuous enough so they're not going to be saved, or they're too far away to get to the Ark in time and they just get caught up in the whole thing? Because again, everybody has to die. We know that they will, which was a big curiosity for me, especially in the case of Ater, which the novel seems to care about. How is he going to get removed from the story?
Right.
Is he going to convert to Satan worship once?
What about Misha? They can't do this. They can't do what that last thing you said about they just don't make it to the Ark, because the whole nidus of the flood was that the world was too far gone.
Yeah, it's supposed to be unsalvageable.
Right. So if Misha's there, I think it's going to have to be the villains pick them off, or there's some unholy war with T-Rexes and Velociraptors, hopefully, where these characters die. Mm-hmm. Maybe the older adults can die off screen. That is kind of bizarre to me. I don't know. Maybe it would be a more dour story if we're just in this awful world and things just continuously get worse, but it would make a hell of a lot more sense.
It would make more sense.
From a perspective of where this is going.
Yeah, this novel has to confirm the biblical account, or at least their interpretation of the biblical account, which we know is fairly literal. Mm-hmm. I suspect what is going to happen is we're going to have a combination of people who were never that into God in the first place converting to Satan worship so they can justifiably be killed, and then characters who are too moral or too young to make a real choice or to be converted will be picked off by villains, so that we eventually end off by process of elimination with just Noah and his family, which I think is going to reveal the unbelievability of the situation that the Bible describes, because frankly it is not believable to me that 8 people are the only people on earth that are virtuous in God's eyes, and that they all are the same family. That is such a wild thing, and that the novel is going to have to demonstrate that in fiction and make it seem feasible is such an enormous task to me, which does kind of make me want to read the other two.
Even not getting into the literalism here, this is just frankly not what the narrative is doing. We are not moving in this direction. The whole 8 people thing, the only virtuous thing, I think the false equivalence is God didn't flood Stonesboro, St. Balasar University campus. It was imagine the whole world were Los Angeles. It was not like Earth, but just a little bit worse. It was supposed to be this horribly inconceivable, different entire experience, and we're not there. We're nowhere near there. There are all these villages full of friendly little people who want to have parties. This is not the world that gets flooded, even in the Old Testament.
Even all these little elves.
All these little elves.
And they basically are like, they're like little Keebler elves. They're like, welcome to our little village. Like,
I did kind of conceive of them as non-human. Is that bad?
I mean, they're barely fleshed out at all. Like, they don't do anything.
Right. Which I thought they'd come back too, but whatever.
If I had to guess, and without using my tarot cards, I would have to guess that there's going to be like a time skip at some point where it's like, and now shit's really bad, and that'll just happen. Because I don't think that this novel is going to be able, or this series of novels is going to be able to depict a slow decline in the way that it would need to for that to be believable.
Here's a lazy solution. This is going to retread on pretty much what we were saying about the broader arc, but this is something that you can do right now, fix this thing. Foreshadowing. A Tear's character arc is the exact opposite direction that it should be to make this work.
Yeah.
So let's say a Tear's still down on his luck. There's still the opening. A Tear has always been like the most gung-ho, I love the creator, I only eat grain, I don't like sacrificing animals, but I do it because it's the right thing to do. And slowly he starts getting seduced to the other side. And these conversations don't end in unity. They end in a Tear being like, okay, well, I don't really get it. And we start to see through him the decay of the world. That might still work, even with the friendly little villagers, even with the nice little men who want to give you carpentry jobs. If we can see through one person the allure of sin, I think that could work for this novel. You'd have to fix it a lot more in the second ones, but it would be a little bit less of a lift.
I think that's an awesome idea. And I think that something that the novel could do, or some specific examples that the novel could use that like are picking up some of the pieces that are already there, is like a Tear really likes the belly dancers. And then Nama notices that. And then she's like, and this is actually a thing that's in the novel, she's like, oh, well, I actually also run the belly dancing club. Mm-hmm. And she's like, let me show you in private. I can show you the belly dancing stuff. And she does it to like get Noah to be jealous maybe. And so she like takes a Tear off. Mm-hmm. They ambiguously, I mean, they wouldn't have sex even in this novel because this novel can't conceive of extramarital sex. Right. So I don't know, they hold hands or something while she's belly dancing. And then Noah confronts her alone and is like, hey, you're tempting my friend. Right. And then she's like, oh, but now we're alone, and like, wouldn't you like to see what I showed him? And then he can still like, reject her. But at that point, a Tear and him have like this schism. And there's like multiple levels of character interaction that fuel that. And see how easy that was just to come up with off the cuff just by changing the direction of his character arc? Yeah. This is what I keep coming across is Tim and K. Marie are hoisting themselves by their own homeschool petard. They can't commit to even depicting sin, let alone expressing how it could be tempting, or expressing how a world could get to the point where a flood would be necessitated. Like, I see what you're trying to do. I see what's going on here, but I feel like we have this invisible hand of like the world's worst content editor keeping everything interesting out of the story. Yeah, I think for me, like in what you just said, what was key is that like they are too afraid to even really truly depict sin, which is holding this book back. Right. Like, and I'm not saying like have like graphic on-screen sex, but even something like, oh, I'll give you a private belly dancing lesson, and then they go out of the scene. That's all you need. Yeah. That works for kids, that works for adults, it works for teenagers. But to point back to the introductory letter that you, I'm sure, will have clipped by this point, join us as we respectfully imagine what life may have been like. They can't, because they're afraid of offending their own audience by depicting the depravity of man in too detailed a way. Right. And that's tragic. It is. I agree. They seem to be so afraid of this side of the human experience that they dislike, that they can't even allow themselves to really imagine it, because imagining it would be to allow it into their mind. And that's like, oh no, at that point it's already too late. It's inside you. It's in your walls, it's in your walls, it's in your walls. The belly dancers are in your walls, Andrew. Oh my god. But
Okay, so the fedora is off, guys. Like, I'm talking from a purely Christian perspective. That's how it works, is you overcome that temptation. It's not, you act like it doesn't exist. These things are a part of the world, and they were a part of the world at this point in history, and to not depict it, or to not even hint at it, it kneecaps your own mission here. And it's very frustrating for me, both as a fiction and as a work of apologism.
You know, the thing that kept coming to my mind was, where's the orgies? And that's not a joke.
No, yeah, Sodom and Gomorrah.
That's like one of the number one sins that I think that there can be and would likely exist in a sacrilegious, prehistoric kingdom led by a man who wants to hook up with a lot of women,
right,
and have lots of sexy women around him. And again, is a king who has absolute power. Most of the male authority figures in this novel are essentially daddy who can do whatever they want. They have all of the authority, and everyone is constantly asking whoever is daddy in the room for permission.
Right.
I can elaborate on that if you want, but that's the way that every interaction with a male authority figure works in this book.
Please tell me all about daddy.
Okay, so Noah has to ask permission from his dad to begin his character arc, yes? And then when they are trying to go and get the iron, they have to go to Town Daddy, which is the council, which is led by Council Daddy, who is a man who's like, okay, I will let you go on your boat and go get your bigger boat parts. And then when they get to the place where the boat parts are, they have to go ask Boat Daddy. And Boat Daddy says, yes, I will give you iron, but first I have to go ask Country Daddy, who's his King Dad. And King Dad says, yes, I will allow intercultural exchange to happen. It always rolls up to somebody's daddy, like literally or figuratively.
It's almost like this novel's philosophy presupposes an archy of the patters.
Yeah, you
could call it a patriarchy.
That's really good. I love that. I love how you stitched those those root words together.
Yet a third term that I've come up with, ex nihilo.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was gonna call it like daddyism or something, but I like patriarchy better.
Something I forgot to mention about suxposition is in
Sex
bad
positions?
writing, suxposition. Close. Suxposition.
Oh, okay. I was thinking about daddy, sorry.
Something I was talking about suxposition was bad writers or writers who miss the mark do it by accident. This is Nova's playlist to a T, because they assume all of these things about the world that are just wrong-headed and scary, and I think the patriarchal leanings here are kind of emblematic of that.
There is like a horror element to this in the way that you are always asking for the approval of a higher force. Yeah, always at the mercy of somebody else who can tell you yes or no.
Which is based when it's God.
Yeah.
But when it's a city daddy, I don't know if I like it as much.
Yeah, I don't like it quite as much either. It's a little bit more uncomfortable when he's right there. And it reveals like how whims-based it is. I was going to say whimsical, but that's not what that word means.
No, it not reveals... exactly how that word works.
It reveals like how whims-based it is. You know, like if they had happened to catch City Dad on like a bad day, then City Dad would have been like, you can't have your boat parts.
And that would be it. Do you think, Jay, and also Tim and K. Marie, that this book needs a prologue?
No book ever needs a prologue. What are you asking?
I disagree. Well, used to they did. So it's kind of a weird thing. Just so we're on the same playing field here, I'm sure a lot of us already implicitly understand this. A prologue, especially in fantasy and sci-fi, is a sort of contract to the reader where you're saying, I realize that we're going to be on the farm doing farm boy stuff for a couple chapters, but this book is going somewhere. There's going to be awesome stuff that happens. Here's a wizard killing someone. I vacillate on whether we need it here because the target audience knows the story of Noah's Ark. And I also don't want necessarily a chapter talking about how the rain was pelting down as Noah was furiously shoving the rhinoceroses onto the boat. Misha drifted away in a horrible typhoon. It would help a little bit with that central plot issue that you were talking about earlier. I think.
No, because that's just passing the buck. I mean, it is making a guarantee to the reader that it gets interesting later, but why read a thing that gets interesting later when you can read a thing that's just interesting? So, in other words, just make the farm parts good, and then you don't need the prologue.
Well, because we need a paint-by-the-numbers coming-of-age story so that we can backfill something into our Bible fanfiction.
I don't want it to be paint by numbers, though. This book has such an incredible opportunity to be so wildly interesting. I've never read a fantasy novel that purports to be set during this time period, whether, like, biblical or otherwise.
Sure.
I want to know what the cultures, and there's magic, so what the magic is like in this time where God is sort of around, like he's definitely distant, but he's like kind of there, at least in thought. And I want to know what that feels like, where there's like this new world and everything is kind of magic because nothing is yet known. Like there's no maps really, it's not explored. There's no reason the farm part shouldn't be interesting. There's no reason that we should be winking at the reader the whole time, being like, they grow these beans that when you brew them into a drink, it gives you energy.
Yeah, that part
and
was kind
you
of
can brew
stupid.
it to different strengths or ice it down and it's a bean brew. Like there's no reason we should be doing that. We could be doing any number of more interesting things. We could be, I don't know, we could be fending off Nephilim that are besieging the farm. Like why are we wasting time with this?
Yeah, kind of going off that point, there's no reason that we need the animals to have stupid names too. That
my
was
God.
probably the worst. That like we can't call a Tyrannosaurus Rex a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but we can call a cow and not a bovar.
Yeah, some of them are very obscure.
Like there's a limit. And they mentioned that in the extra textual thing that, we thought in this different era that animals would have different names. And here's another thing in fantasy. It's called implied translation. You have a little bit of wiggle room to say, okay, obviously in my secondary or alternate world, they wouldn't literally call cows, but because it would be stupid to come up with a proper noun for them, let's just use the word that the reader knows, because we're translating this from the Middle Earth texts or whatever.
Yeah, literally.
You know? That bothered me a lot. That was up there with TFLD, with things that made me close the book.
Yeah, I don't know why why are we drawing the border at coffee and cows? Like, if we're coming up with different names for things that had different names in the ancient world, why are we calling these things boats?
Oh, yeah. I was going to say boats, yeah.
Why are we using words like city?
Iron, gold.
Yeah.
Like,
you would think gold feels like such a symbolically rich material. Like, that would surely be called, like, Christ ore or something like that.
Christ ore. Well, no, because gold is associated with the bad guys because it's a sin to covet wealth.
Oh, that's true. Satan's skin.
Ooh, I like that.
Serpent's scales.
Ooh, yeah. Because, like, gold is flaky.
True. Can we talk about that they have capitalism?
In that they have, like, you need job to live?
No, it's deeper than that, I'm afraid. This book is so unable to imagine a world that is ancient and Mediterranean that it invented ancient capitalism, in that the reason that they go and get iron is not like just purely because they have this zeal for exploration and knowledge, although some of them do. Mm-hmm. It's also that Noah's boss, and this is from, I'm paraphrasing here from page 159, Noah's boss is noticing that the other shipbuilders in town are also trying to build bigger ships. Mm-hmm. And he's literally trying to outcompete them. And he thinks that the thing that will make his business survive in the long run is that he'll have a monopoly on boats that can sail long distances, because if he gets the iron first, he can build the big boats. Whereas he's worried that they're going to do it first and that he'll be put out of business.
That's a head scratcher. It might be a step too far for me, but that's probably because I'm a business major and all of that stuff is in my head anyways. But I don't know, like the idea of a market, I guess I didn't take it that way. I just thought they were like, oh, I want to build bigger and better boats, so I'm getting iron. And that transcended economics to me. But you're right, I did forget about the motivation. I don't know, I'm gonna have to reread that scene to give you a good answer on that one. I definitely think it's cogent that these people are completely unable to separate their fictional world from the paradigms that they live in. So we can meet in the middle there.
I think we can agree that they are imagining capitalism, even if they wouldn't and realize that necessarily or cop to that.
They're definitely thinking about the free market.
Maybe free market is what I should have said instead of capitalism. Equally loaded, but more literally descriptive of what's happening.
Yeah, because they're literally selling it in a boat market, right?
Yeah. And they want to be the most competitive boat company.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there were always, people competing for resources in markets and like trade was happening. But this, to me, has the subjective flavor of capitalism as opposed to just like ancient trade.
It's definitely more like I did market analysis on the upcoming trends in boat making rather than I want to be the best boat maker and make a lot of money in like a more free market kind of idea. So, okay, you've made me come around to it. I get it.
It feels like I went to BoatCon 2000 BC and I was given like a speed pitch on like upcoming developments in the boat industry. And I'm worried that we're going to go under if we don't innovate in the space and become disruptors.
God damn. I didn't like hearing any of those words. I don't have a way to fix this because of what this book is, but we have got to figure out something to do with the like borderline catechism dialogue. Everything that's not TFLD is like Ater and Noah talking back and forth about like what God's teachings are. This is a Christian book for Christian kids and teenagers. I get that there has to be a pedagogical aspect to this, but there has to be a way to do it a little bit more organically. I don't know what that looks like. It might involve some accordioning, like we like to say. You might need to cut it and then expand some scenes to have like a little bit more of a through line so we're not hit over the head with the exposition. We get it in pieces, or like view it like kind of Jesus, like parables. Can we see it illustrated more than it being told to us?
I like the idea of parables, and I think that could also solve the problem that I raised earlier, which is that like God somehow passed down knowledge to these people at some point, but it's not written down anywhere, and it's being passed down through oral tradition, but in what form is unclear. If God had given them parables that they could tell each other, that might fix that issue. Mm-hmm. Of course, that introduces the issue then of like, well, if people knew these things in ancient times, why didn't they write them down and put them in the Bible? But we already have a problem, so we might as well replace it with a better problem.
Right.
At least that's how I look at it. Secondary suggestion is, I hear your accordioning, and I raise you one show don't tell. Why are these conversations at all? These catechistic conversations don't have to be conversations. They can be actual incidents in which, if we're going with this like Ater slips into darkness angle, they can be moments where Ater is like doing something that Noah considers sinful, and then Noah like literally does a corrective measure or demonstrates an alternative action. And then we have like him living the Gospels instead of just like doing really boring apologism.
Living the Gospels. That I think that is kind of like a part of the common core of catechism. These aren't lessons, these are frameworks for your life. And it would be nice to see that life lived and not discussed abstractly in between T-Rex encounters.
Yeah, and Ater being good at farming.
Right. Ater's such a good farmer. He really knows how to raise those crops.
I just imagine him like with a plow slung over his shoulder in every scene.
Yeah.
Or like a hoe.
Yeah, he's just got that thing on him.
You know, like a little...
It's like that painting, American Gothic, what's it called?
Yeah. Not like a pitchfork, though. Like a
hoe.
Like a hoe, I guess. You gotta stay strapped, you never know.
That would make sense. He has to repurpose the tools of his trade to defend himself in this evil world. That's more compelling.
In a fallen world. Got that thing on you.
It's so easy to fix this. And it's very frustrating to me that it wasn't done.
Dude, what if he literally beat his plow into a sword at one point, and he was like, I'm gonna fight now.
Yeah.
I'm going crazy mode.
Right. This snake man told me to kill you. Sorry, Noah.
I took my hoe to the forge, and Iron Daddy let me turn it into a cool dagger, and now I'm gonna kill you with it.
Because Snake Daddy said so.
He gave me permission, in fact. Struggling to settle back into an easy rhythm, Noah rolled onto his back and tried to catch his breath as slow and deliberate strokes carried him back to the starting point. A splash from Ater let him know he had made it, and he allowed his legs to sink until his feet hit the bottom. Breathing hard, Ater said,
I'm still faster.
Not by much. I'm gaining on you.
Only because you had a head start and I wasn't trying very hard.
Ater grinned. Noah stepped closer. Well, if you're so fast, then why can't you dodge this? He lunged forward and locked his arm around Ater's waist. Planting his feet, Noah lifted his friend above the water and then slammed him under it. He wiped his eyes and raised his arms in triumph. Noah spun at the sound of familiar laughter from the shore, where Emzara and Adira sat giggling. He kept one arm raised in a greeting to them, but Ater slammed into him and drove him under. The surprise attack caused him to swallow a bit of seawater, so as he staggered to his feet, Noah coughed and gasped for air.
Now we're even,
Ater said. Yes, we are. Truce?
You like that? Why?
I like that the, male characters in this book consistently bond via, physical activity. Mm-hmm. I felt like that was kind of cute. Mm. It's nice that the men were able to bond at all, even though it's really shallow.
Yeah.
Whenever, two dudes are bonding, it's always through, physical activity. There's the part where Noah first, is attracted to Emzara. I wrote in the margins, she loves her dad and is domestic, wife detected. That's literally how we're introduced to her, is that she's very respectful to her father and that she likes doing, home stuff.
It read very, very uncomfortably for the vast majority of the relationship between them.
I want to call back to a conversation that we started to have off air about how, although there is technically no age gap between them and they are both technically adults, the age gap is extremely felt. Mm-hmm. It is not there in the text, but it feels like it's there. She really feels like a child bride.
Do you think that's a function of the patriarchal suppositions made in the story?
I think that's definitely part of it, but I think it's definitely reinforced by the fact that whenever we get into her head, which is not all that often, she's always thinking about obeying God or obeying Noah.
Yeah, that kind of does seem to be the two things. Yeah, she comes off as immature. It's really awkward because, again, there is not a literal age gap between the two characters. You might say a maturity gap, maybe. Her agency is very, very limited, and that makes the scope of her desires limited. Which, you could say the same thing for Noah, but he has the carpenter thing. For her, she's pretty good at accounting and likes to draw animals.
Oh yeah, I forgot about the painting.
But she doesn't want to be, a painter for the king or whatever. She just likes painting in the margins of her accountant job that she does for her daddy.
Yep.
Which limits her, and which is annoying because, this doesn't have to be a political statement. If we're going for a patriarchal traditionalist marriage, we can do that and not have the level of awkwardness be here between these two characters.
I'm not convinced that discomfort is located entirely in me, the reader. I think that there's something inherently uncomfortable about the way it exists in the book that I can't quite pinpoint, or maybe don't have the words to pinpoint.
This is probably the 20th time I've said it, but it's kind of endemic to their chaste, homeschooled courting ritual, where the attraction is just so mounted up by what kind of amounts to barrier aggression, like how dogs will bark at each other when there's a fence between them, but not fight when there's no fence. Mm-hmm. They have this crazy tension that is disproportional. I don't know, maybe this is demisexual or whatever, but it feels very out of line with the length and intensity of their friendship. It feels very breedery, like you mentioned in your little section that you read. He makes these weird jokes about impregnating her. I don't like it. I don't think that we could fix it without a long heart-to-heart with our two authors, but I do think that it detracts from the novel.
I definitely think that your barrier aggression analogy is onto something. It really feels like because these are two adults who have gone their whole lives without even any meaningful friendships with people of the gender that they're attracted to.
Yeah!
Of course they're gonna, go crazy for, the first person that they date because they have all this, frankly, pent-up sexual energy
Right.
that they have never learned how to channel. Of course, they're going to be like, I love you.
Right.
After, like, dating once.
Because they don't know anything.
Yeah. They are adolescent, like you said. And in the context of this world that, like you also said, is itself adolescent, where the available scope of human knowledge about human relationships is fundamentally limited, that has the potential to be, like, really interesting.
Yeah. Again, they can wait until marriage. Imzara can aspire to be a housewife. That is perfectly fine under a modern feminist apolitical stance. If that's what they want, then that's okay. It's just the clear rifts between these two characters that makes it feel like they're not engaging with each other as human beings, so much as love interests demanded by plot and or fate. And or God.
And some of that might be the fact that this is written, I guess, after the Ark Encounter, or maybe alongside the Ark Encounter's lore is being written. Mm-hmm. In the Ark Encounter, Imzara already exists as a character. She appears, like, in animatronic displays and stuff like that. So we know that Imzara has to be there. She has to fall in love with Noah. She has to be his, like, helpmeet, or whatever the Bible phrase is. So they have to fall in love, and maybe the book felt like it could sort of get away with just making that happen without actually making it happen, because it's already true, sort of, in a sense.
Right. Which is kind of Mormon, in a way. So I don't know what to do with that.
Oh, here's the part where they do the ankle thing.
Yeah, read that.
The bottom of her robe ended just above her ankles, which were wound about by the leather straps of her sandals. Her hair, no longer pulled back and tied behind her head as it had been at the beach, draped over her shoulders. A stray lock hung down the left side of her face. It's subtle, but, like, it's the only body parts that we get physical or, like, fixation on, so that means something.
Now that's downright medieval.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of the weirdness, or at least some of it, results from the fact that, as we've said, they're legally adults, but they both sort of act like children, but Imzara more so. Mm-hmm. And so, like, it's cute, but it's also weird to see adults behaving a little bit like high schoolers. Like, it's cute when you forget that they're adults, and then when you remember, it's like, this is not how adults should be behaving in a relationship.
Do you think there was any cognitive dissonance on your part with Noah chronologically being 40?
No, I just was reading that as 18.
Because that's something that I did, is I kind of had a 40-year-old man in my head, even though, like, implicitly he would probably be genetically 18. And again, the exposition or lack thereof worked very well. I still thought of him as a 40-year-old man, which was entirely my fault as a reader and not something that needs to be addressed. Well, but it did kind of color my interpretation.
I don't know if maybe it does, though, because I can accept that humans age slower biologically. They're like D&D elves or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
But what I can't accept is that a person who has had 40 years of experience hasn't had 40 years of experience. So, like, regardless of his, like, bodily age, I don't believe that he hasn't, like, absorbed 40 years of life experience. So, like, that needs to be explained somehow, I think. He would be more mature.
Well, then are years what they are to us? Already, like, I experience weeks the way I used to experience days, so I'm sure the elasticity of time is a factor here. Like, oh, that's another thing, is that everything is measured in moons, which is a pet peeve.
Oh, you don't like that?
You don't really have to fix it because you are not the only people that are guilty of this, especially in fantasy. But moon and month come from the same root. Talk about Tiffany problem etymology. Month means moon. You can just say month. It's okay.
I feel like moon is more elegant in this case.
Okay, well, that's anti-German of you. Or maybe anti-French. I actually don't know. It's too Proto-Indo-European.
Oh.
What?
Bible plot hole detected. No, this is so important. Okay, list the things that you associate with the Noah story.
Okay, big boat, 2 of each animal, flood, storm, Mount Ararat, rainbow.
Yes, okay. So God created the rainbow for Noah's Ark, yes?
Well, that's what I thought, but I read the part in the end.
Because there's a part in the book during the, I think it's the pterodactyl cliff scene, where there's a rainbow. And I was like, wait a second, that's not supposed to be there yet.
And that was mentioned in the back. Did you read that part?
No, I must have skimmed over it.
In their apologism, and I've not consulted the actual text on this, the rainbow was not invented for the express purpose of this. The rainbow was used as a symbol in this specific situation, but as a natural phenomenon, it could have very well predated Noah's flood. So whether or not that's true, I don't know, but that's what they said.
That's not how I learned Bible as a wee youngster.
But that's what makes this book interesting. Even as like the Bible is literature, is they were talking, like, I think it was the intro that was like, most people think that Noah was mocked for building a boat, but there's nowhere in the text that says that. And yeah, that's what I learned. I learned that there was a guy building a boat and all his neighbors thought he was crazy. The potential to bring in apologism or to draw parallels is so, I don't know, evergreen, fertile as soil.
Yeah, fertile as the ancient Near East.
Right.
In the year 6000 BC when the earth was young.
Right, some ambiguous distance away from Eden. So another thing, Eden isn't the name of the garden. The garden is just a place in Eden.
In Eden, yeah. Eden the country.
It really illustrates fiction's power to teach truths to people.
There's moments where it's like, yeah, it's really investing in like, this is factually accurate. We're going to correct some of your misconceptions about what the Bible actually says. Speaking of Eden, though, there's that part really early on where they're like, oh, I heard if you go to the Garden of Eden, you go insane and you come back as like a shambling madman. Did you catch that?
I didn't. That was probably in the TFLDs that I didn't pay attention to.
Probably.
That's an interesting concept.
Yeah, they just throw that out there. I was like, whoa, that's like world building. Like, you made that choice to make that an in-world rule. Like, that's definitely not in the Bible.
Yeah, again, I'm not big on the Old Testament, but I can't imagine that's what the flaming sword does to you.
No, why would it be a sword?
That's good world building. I hope that gets delivered on in one of the sequels.
Oh, wouldn't that be crazy?
So you were touching earlier on fact and fiction and truth and all of these different things. And dear authors, I have to ask you, and I promise this is asked in good faith. I promise that I'm not trying to be dismissive of what you're trying to do from a Christian perspective. Why did you write this book? And let's also assume, for the sake of keeping this interesting, that the answer is not to market my creationist theme park.
Okay, I'm buying your premise for the sake of good faith discussion in the marketplace of ideas. Carry on, debate streamer.
Well, can you guess?
Well, my instinct is to say it's didactic, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's rhetoric more than literature. It wants to impart values to you and convince you of those values' worthiness.
Yeah, and it wants to lend credence to a story that already exists and, for the target audience at least, should be taken almost for granted. We're evangelical Christians. The story of Noah's Ark and the flood is a part of our canon. That's already there. What are you trying to do other than add facts?
Yeah.
Add things that could possibly have happened to the equation.
Make it feel more real, maybe, by fleshing it out?
Right. And it reminded me, this is a little bit of a digression, but since Jay has stopped mentioning Catcher in the Rye every episode, I need to pick up the slack, and I need to start mentioning Petrarch in every episode. So I fell in love with the poem. It's the, I think, 31st poem in Il Cancionera. I think it's called like Quest Anima Gentil, This Gentle Soul. I'll spare you the gory details, but it describes like a soul when it dies, it passes through all of the stars. And it's beautiful. It's so comforting about the concept of death. But when you read it, it says like the soul will go to Venus after it leaves Earth. And then it'll go to Mars. And then it goes to the sun. And then finally it will conquer Jupiter and all of the stars. And you're reading that and that's like, that's not right. The stars are not in that order. That's not how the solar system works. And it's because Petrarch is 200 years dead before Copernicus was even around. So he had no way of knowing this. This was his world that he lived in. This was his understanding of the universe. And I'm like, That's so interesting. That's so compelling. I texted you, Jay. I was like, is this like a function of pathos? Because I pity the speaker of this poem because he is factually inaccurate. Like,
science has ruined his poem forever.
Right. I don't think he's pathetic traditionally, but I definitely am like, oh, if only you knew how the solar system was actually structured in real life.
Yeah.
And you responded with something that would legitimately, I'm not kidding, it legitimately changed the way that I consume media and think of the things that I read and listen to. You told me there is a difference between a work being factual and being true.
Yes.
So I think you were talking about like emotional truths, like things that resonate with the speaker and or the reader, right?
For the sake of disclosure, this is an idea that a version of came down to me from a poet that I've worked with a lot, Meg Day, and I don't know where they got it from. Maybe it's original to them. I'm not 100% sure. But this is a version of the idea that I first heard in one of their lectures, which is an idea that I now teach in my own poetry classes because I found it to be so useful. So the idea is that there's a difference, as Andrew already said, between truth and factuality. Speaking specifically of poems do not aim to be factual. They aim to be true, which, as Andrew also said, means emotionally true. And emotionally true means the poem is really representative of a real emotional experience or a real belief that the speaker of the poem holds. And that truth can be arrived at or expressed even via factually inaccurate statements. This is why a poem can describe scenarios that never occurred, but nonetheless, the description and ordering of those events in a specific way can create an experience that arrives at like a specific emotion that feels true, like it feels convincing.
That's very salient to kind of the thought process behind writing this book in the first place. Like I mentioned, I closed the book multiple times because I could not take the twee-friendly little dialogue. I did not care what new stupid terms they came up with for all the stupid animals. I was just so tired of it. And I would Google the actual flood narrative in the Bible, which I've avoided traditionally because I find the Old Testament very challenging. And in reading this, to their perspective, limited view of Noah's story, I found that there was a lot of things that rang true. Like, as a work of literature, the flood narrative fits into the broader scope of the Bible in ways that I was not expecting, that I hadn't accounted for. And the last thing, Jay, the very last thing that I care about when I'm thinking about God's first covenants with man, and I'm thinking about transcending the world of sin through faith in God, is how many stupid cubits the boat was. Like, that's...
Yeah.
I don't need to know that. I don't need to go to somewhere in Kentucky that tells me how this was all supposed to work. That's not the point. That's not why the story has lasted the way that it has and to the extent that it has. I know you guys aren't going to want to hear this, Tim and K. Marie, because it sucks to hear, but literally, I'm not kidding, of all of the books that we've read in English Club Podcast, this one deserves the least to exist. It has the least claim on serving a purpose as a narrative.
Yeah, it's so fixated on convincing you of the factuality of itself that it totally misses the point of literature, which is to arrive at like a thematic emotional truth and to provide you, the reader, with a meaningful experience as you read and digest what it is that it claims.
And that sentiment is not anti-Christian, and I need to keep driving that point in because it would be very easy to do a us versus them mentality and just be like, oh, these evangelicals, you know, they have such backwards ways. But no, you guys are failing at your own game. And that's frustrating to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you, Andrew, can read the story of Noah's Ark and it works for you in a way that provides emotional truth, then this book should also be trying to do that and do it in a more expansive way,
right,
in a space that gives the story's themes more time to like develop, and ultimately it can just confirm what's in the Bible. But by, I think, lengthening it and allowing us to see the story play out with like our contemporary understandings of character arcs in a literature that we recognize, then it can be even more resonant, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
But instead, it's like, well, how did we source the iron if there's no iron in this part of the Near East where we've determined that Noah lived?
Right.
Well, we have to find a way that they culturally exchanged with an evil country, and it's like,
yep.
This is not the point.
Let's say I'm a fedora atheist Levian Satanist, and you're trying to convince me of the veracity of the Bible from a young Earth creationist perspective. Again, the last thing I need to know is, were the pterodactyls pissed off by the mining operations on their cliff? Because that's what I was thinking. That's what I took away from Noah. What is it called? Noah, Man of Destiny, is, holy shit, like, we're disrupting the environment of these pterodactyls.
Yeah.
Which is not what you guys intended.
It's causing you to use a phrase that you used once in a long ago English club meeting, Andrew. Like, you're causing me to ask questions that you don't want me to ask.
Yeah, exactly.
You've introduced superfluous elements and brought them up at inopportune times, and now I'm wondering about elements of this world that are not germane to the thing that you actually care about.
Right.
So now we're at like a kind of talking past each other.
And it sucks, because this could have worked. Here at the English Club, we like to kill the author, but we like to preserve the author's vision, if that makes sense. It's really frustrating seeing something like this, where I can tell that someone talented, or at least someone who had read books before, had done this before. And that's more than I can say for some of our other books.
Yeah.
And to see it fail at this scale is disheartening. But I'm hoping that you guys can take home, like, even the little things, like reversing a Terrace plot line, I think would be a day's work, just to change some dialogue tags around and maybe change the final scene. Okay, reverse a tear, put the children cage in. You already are working at a higher level than you already were. So you're not far, you're just not there.
There's at least escalation in that version, even if it's a little disjointed.
Right. But what can you do?
This is something, Andrew, that I don't think we've ever actually talked about, this type of phrasing, but I think we can both agree that it's a type of phrasing that's often very unhelpful, but it has probably come to mind for both of us as we've critiqued stuff in the podcast. So we want to respect the author's vision if we know what it is, right?
Right.
But sometimes the thing you set out to do is
not worth it.
Wrong. Like, what do you do when it's not the execution that's the problem, but it's like the initial goal is the problem? And the answer is maybe just don't write it. And I think that's the solution that I arrive at for this book, which is, as you have already concluded for a different reason, this has the least reason to exist as a book.
Yeah. Call me naive, but I'm still on the ideas are cheap, execution is everything train. The right answer here is to not have done it in the first place, but I think there's a version of this that could have worked. This is just not it, and maybe one day we'll do a travel vlog and we'll go to the giant Noah's Ark museum, but I don't think that will be anywhere near as compelling as what's already in Genesis. I can't imagine, and that's frustrating, because, like, you guys, again, we're going to assume that this is not some cynical cash grab for your theme park.
And I don't think it's cynical. I think it's advertising to an extent, but I don't think it's cynical.
Okay.
I think that they had a bunch of leftover stuff that they produced in the course of their research, and they were like, oh, we can put this in a book.
Okay. See, I find all advertising cynical, so that's probably just a distinction of terminology.
Sure.
You guys care about this stuff. This is your worldview. This is your mission to accomplish. It just could have been done better. I feel like we get more and more negative with these episodes, but I swear it's just a trend. I hope Tim and K. Marie, you guys can come back with something to work off of for your next exciting trilogy in the Old Testament expanded universe, whatever you guys want to do.
The OTCU.
Right. But I wouldn't care as much as I did if I didn't see the potential. And I know that almost sounds abusery in the way that I'm presenting it, but like I'm only this mad at you because I care. But like,
I love you so much that I have to yell at you. No, Noah.
Right. It won't kill you to think outside of your worldview. If anything, it'll galvanize your positions. I've grown a lot stronger in my own personal beliefs by engaging in a friendly way and faithfully with people who have complete opposite beliefs as me. And that's religious, that's political, that's personal. I think it's kind of a lost art, not to sound like an enlightened centrist, to see the other side as human. Even something as simple as understanding that sin is tempting for a reason, I think could really change the way that the story works.
I agree, Tim. Like, let yourself imagine the orgy. No, seriously. Okay, no, let me finish. This is important. Sin is really tempting. That's the whole point of it. Like, let yourself imagine the orgy, describe the orgy, empathize with your villain, who has to be, if this is going to be a successful book, more than just a cackling, sneering, wife-hating Satan dick sucker. Like, he's got to be a real person. And in order to imagine him as a real person, you have to imagine why it might be that he wants to have an orgy with a bunch of hot belly dancers that are his daughter's age. Because that's a real historical thing that certainly happened. Sure. I mean, you know it did. You wrote about it.
Right.
Let yourself imagine why that might occur. You will learn something as a person, not just as a writer, I think.
Absolutely. And you can keep the moral values the same.
Yeah, you can come to the same conclusion. I will disagree with you forever, but it is your right to continue to come to your bad conclusion and put it in a book even.
Well, I'll be there not at the orgy with you, and Jay can be over in the belly dancing room.
Oh, yeah.
But point is, it would definitely make things a lot stronger.
Well, Andrew, I am very much down to go to the Ark Encounter with you someday. Maybe if those coffee and PayPal dollars and maybe even someday Patreon dollars roll in, they'll pay for our car trip across this great, beautiful nation.
Yeah, we're a little bit far from Kentucky, but we can make it work with your generous support.
We can make it happen. And we can eat at their not vegan, not vegetarian restaurant of sin. In the meantime, we have 2 more books in this series that I imagine we're not going to read anytime soon. So in lieu of that, why don't we turn to our good old prognosticating buddies, the tarot cards, and see what they have to say about the futures of some of our favorite characters. Andrew, I've pre-shuffled the cards. I'm ready to go. Who would you like to hear about first?
I have to know what happens to my wife, Nama.
Okay. Let's get a reading for Nama's future. She would like that. She likes oracles. Her best friend's an oracle.
She does, right, yeah.
The 5 of Cups.
Ooh.
This is extremely fitting because this card signifies a personal loss. Often the loss of an important emotional connection, which is, I think, pretty irrefutably, in this case, Noah. But also, I suspect she will continue to grow more and more distant from her father.
Mm-hmm.
Even though she's been promoted to the role of, like, high priestess of ultimate evil, and she has this authoritative role now, her dad's only going to get more evil and probably hook up with more women, and that's going to make her even sadder. She's going to feel even more apart from the family, despite her elevated status.
I can see that happening.
The other thing about the 5 of Cups is it suggests that it's not a total loss of emotional connections. Something yet remains. And I think the remnant in this case is, of course, Noah. Mm-hmm. He's going to come back. They're going to reunite. And what will happen? That's for the rest of the series to determine.
Ooh, yeah, okay. I like that a lot. Okay, so the implication of, everyone needs to either be dead or a Satan worshiper by the end of the story.
Both.
Makes me wonder about Misha, the younger sister of Noah.
Oh, yeah.
If you could give me a reading on that.
Yeah, she's like a small bean.
Yeah.
Right? Like, she can do no wrong.
Yeah. Right. So, like, how does that end?
Ooh. The Wheel of Fortune reversed. I'm seeing that she comes to an unfortunate and sudden end that is not a fault of her own. It is the result of external circumstances. So I think something is going to just happen to her at some point, like maybe the farm burns down.
Ooh, okay, that would make sense because we have that foreshadowing with the village burning down in the kidnapping arc.
True, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, I think she's going to die. And this is not from the card, this is from my brain. I think likely it'll be off screen.
Yeah, it would have to be.
Noah gets a letter. The paper, fun fact, that the letter is written on, they sourced on a separate adventure, which you can read about in their spin-off graphic novel series where they go in hunt of the materials to make paper.
Can your heretical, ungodly powers work on collectives?
Yeah, I think so. I can make that happen.
Okay.
I can ask Cards Daddy.
God damn it. I would like to know so while we're on the subject of like innocent people, what about this friendly village full of people who just want to party? Like, what happens to them?
What happens to the Keebler Elf village?
Yeah, the Keebler Elf village.
This is an interesting card for this. The Hanged Man.
Ooh.
It represents a sudden, or not sudden, it can be protracted, but in any case, a change of your point of view that affects the way you act in the world. Mm-hmm. So I foresee religious conversion for them. I'm going to say likely forced, but I think that because they're a peaceful people that's not used to conflict, they hesitated a lot to do anything to the kidnappers once they had actually like surrounded them. I think that passivity is going to come back to get them, and they're not going to be properly equipped to fight back, and they will be converted to snake worship.
See, I can tell that that's not an accurate reading because that makes too much sense narratively and draws too deeply from things that have been established.
Yeah, realistically, they're probably just never coming back, right? Like, we'll just never hear about them again.
Right.
I'm really curious about a tear. Do you mind if I do an Ater reading?
I would love an Ater reading.
A tarot reading?
An
Atero reading?
Shut up and play with your stupid cards.
Okay. The Ace of Cups.
Ooh.
Okay, I think Ater is going to willingly convert to Satanism.
Okay, see, that's what I was saying. Okay, I hope that's what happens because that was my literal suggestion.
I think because we've seen that he's like easily swayed by someone saying something religious that sounds kind of cool, I think that's going to happen to him from the Satanist side, and then he's as good as gone.
Oh, okay. One last one.
Sure.
The T-Rex that we know that Noah fights in the gladiator arena. I want to make sure he's okay.
Well, there's no T-Rexes on the Ark, so that might be an issue. Actually, wait, are there?
I don't know.
That's a terrifying prospect for many reasons. Let's do a reading for this T-Rex that we still haven't met.
I want to make sure he's fine.
He survives. This is the Ten of Pentacles. The T-Rex survives.
Okay.
Noah rescues him, and he goes on to father many children, which of course go extinct at a later time.
Right. But at least he had fun while it lasted.
Yep. He made a joke about impregnating his wife the night before their wedding, and it turned out to be prophetic as well.
In his T-Rex language.
Yeah.
I want to see that like rendered into text. It just says roar, 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 said the T-Rex to his wife.
They did that with the pterodactyls. Do you remember?
Yeah. I hate onomatopoeias. I didn't mention that because I know that that's like a pet peeve of mine, but like I can't stand it.
I thought that was like understood as like bad practice.
It is, but like people still do it.
Yeah.
People get away with it, so it can't be that bad practice. But we can change the course of the world one episode at a time.
You fictioners and your bad practices that you keep doing. Us poets don't do anything wrong. We always get it right.
Poetry is a bad practice. Am I right?
Am I right? Ayo.
I can't wait for our first live stream because like I really need you to help me with my work in progress.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about it.
The way that you're able to just come up with shit with your tarot cards is so fun.
Yeah, I'm happy to do a tarot reading for a story in progress. I think that'd be very funny. We didn't do one for Noah and Imzari yet, did we? We totally skipped over the main characters.
We did, because I kind of figured that, we have a whole Bible about that, but we can do your tarot card readings, just to be sure.
Well, there's going to be stuff that happens, like, in between the Noah of this book and the Noah that we Noah from the Bible.
Shut up.
So we can do a reading for like that.
Are we doing 2 readings or a collective reading for them as a couple?
I want to know about them as a couple because that's the big question mark, right? Like we don't know anything about that.
Right.
2 of Swords. There's going to be a period of doubt between them. I think that they're going to be tested in their belief in God, and because that's what their marriage is founded upon, that will then put some strain on their marriage. I suspect that Noah is going to communicate directly with God about the shipbuilding process, and Amzara is only going to be hearing about God through Noah, and that's going to make her be like, how do I know that he's not just losing it? And that will cause some friction.
See, that's conflict. That's interpersonal conflict between two people who are humans and view each other as humans.
And it's a conflict in which neither of them is necessarily doing something quote-unquote wrong. Like, they're just disagreeing. And there's ways, well, I guess for them that would be wrong, right? Because she's the wife, so she's the helper, and she's questioning husband daddy. You're not supposed to do that. This is why men should marry in this world, because if men married, then they would be able to, like, talk to each other, because their arguments would be continually sort of outranking the other, so they would have to have a conversation and work it out, because otherwise it would just be this successive, well, I say forever.
So I hope that was helpful for you. I hope that you didn't tune out right when the tarot card started and the heresy began, because a lot of this could kind of guide your thoughts moving forward with this fantasy half-true trilogy that you're trying to concoct here. You know, I stand by what I said, that of the books that we've read, this probably has the least cogent reason to have been written. But I do see a lot of potential here for a compelling narrative, if not as apologetics, then as maybe a work of fantasy fiction.
This reminds me, in that way, quite a bit of the Jordan Peterson poetry collection that I did that YouTube video about. That book suffered so much because it seemed that Jordan Peterson was unwilling to, like, be surprised by the things that he was writing about. You know, he just wanted to tell you these, like, unnecessarily grotesque stories about children suffering and dying. They weren't poems in that they failed to, like, convey a coherent truth, but also in that you could tell that as he was writing them, like, he was didactic in telling you something. He was not willing to, like, explore or be uncomfortable.
Right.
In any way. I mean, during the writing process, and certainly not in the, like, text that's produced, the only challenging thing about it is just reading about children suffering for no reason.
Yep.
This book has a very similar problem. The authors are afraid to confront the difficult realities of the thing that they purport to want to write about, which, for me, as it did in the Jordan Peterson episode, raises the question of maybe not why does this exist? Maybe that's a little unfair of us to say, but why does this exist in this form? Right?
Yeah.
The Ark encounter already does what this is doing, and that makes me think that Andrew is right in saying maybe this is cynical advertising. And so that's all we should respect it as.
Kind of like with Jordan Peterson, the idea is just don't go into the city because it's bad. Well, why is it bad? What moral stance are we taking here? We need to make our claim in the sand so that we understand our perspective here. Otherwise, it doesn't work for any audience, let alone your target audience. And I think that's the biggest missed opportunity here is just we're defined by what we overcome, not what we aspire to in very broad senses, you know? This is especially frustrating for me because this is close to working. The things that hold this book back could be fixed in a day. And it wouldn't be a magic bullet, but it definitely would help things along a lot more than we're at right now. So I hope any of that might be helpful for you moving forward. I thought this was going to be a short one, but I guess I was incorrect. But I definitely had a lot of fun with this. I had a lot of reservations going into it because we've never tackled a overtly religious text before. I think the closest we've got to controversy, other than the Jordan Peterson thing, is probably True Allegiance. I'm glad that we were able to find a way to engage with this text that is not relative to the faith being presented here, because this is going to happen no matter where you are. You're going to encounter people who have beliefs that might be antithetical to yours or might just not be your cup of tea. And that doesn't change the validity of their goals here as authors. And when you're critiquing their work, you're going to want to engage with them on their level, no matter what your personal beliefs might be. It was actually really fun to see. It's been a long time since I've engaged with the work that was that far away from where I'm at. And I think a lot came out of it.
Yeah, I think I also learned a lot from reading this, not just about the values that like evangelical Christians are really espousing today from their own mouths, as opposed to filtered through like the content creators that I usually listen to who talk about that kind of stuff, but also more just about craft. I was reminded of the ways in which dialogue can go wrong, because I don't think we've had a book that did this particular dialogue mistake this hard yet on the show.
Yeah, no, we've not.
Yeah, we've had a lot of inane dialogue, and a lot of incomprehensible dialogue, but very little dialogue that is so pointless.
Right.
And it's always a good reminder of the ways things can go wrong.
Yes.
And although I think I outed myself and my particular religious stances fairly early, sorry, Andrew, I hope that my critiques came across as genuine and as in good faith, because they are. I put a lot of thought into what I wanted to say about this. I put a lot of time and effort into reading and annotating it, and I hope that my critiques are received. Like, say, you might receive a foreign asylum seeker in your home. Maybe, even if their ethnicity, religion, culture is different than yours, you'll take them into your home like a good Christian and raise them as your surrogate son. Even if they're of, to use Ben Shapiro's phrase, gang age.
Hey, well, if I've learned anything, it's that you can't amanetize the eschaton. So I just wish you guys the best. Maybe we'll tackle the next 2 books in the series someday. But I think for now, I think we've exhausted the subject of Noah, Man of Destiny, Book 1 of the Remnants trilogy by Tim Chaffey and K. Marie Adams.
Princesses of Earth Volume 1.
Princesses of Earth Volume 1. Oh my god. Well, at least the cover wasn't AI generated, so you guys got that on Nova's playlist.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening. I just want to reiterate what we were saying earlier. Join our community. I'm having the time of my life talking to you guys, and the more the merrier. There's definitely room for you guys, no matter how you're engaging with us. We are always looking for suggestions. We're always looking for feedback, and the best way to do it is to have direct line to us through Discord, email. I run the Instagram, Jay runs the Twitter. Hopefully we'll see you guys again soon. We're trying to come up with new ways to give you guys content that doesn't revolve around reading and annotating an entire book at a time. Other than that, though, I think we're good for tonight. This has been fun. I feel really energized right now.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting this conversation to get quite as deep as it did. I sort of thought we would talk about how weird the like age gap felt, the non-existent age gap felt, and then we would move on.
But no, that's not how we do things here at the English Club Podcast. We go as deep as possible.
Oh yeah. This is the day on which our literary critique and Noah... I almost said Noah's playlist. This is the day... Noah's playlist, Remnant of Princesses of Earth Trilogy, Volume 1. This is the day on which our literary critique and Noah, Man of Destiny are wed. And with that, I bid you good night.
Yeah.
And I'll see you around campus.
Yeah, see you around campus. Get the hell out of here before Jay says something else weird. All right, guys.
That was a good episode. Noah laughed. Well, we haven't technically seen it yet, so let's go with what we heard. How about Thunderstep?
Or Rumblethroat? Tree Smasher? Daggertooth?
I like Daggertooth, Noah said.
So do you really believe that?
Noah's face registered confusion.
That originally the animals only ate plants.
Oh, yeah, I believe that. That's what my grandfather said. Noah scratched his head. Plus, it's hard to believe that the creator would make a world where one creature needs to kill another.